The hot wind swept across the barren cliffs of Zirian 9, carrying with it dust and the sharp scent of iron. From a distance, the jagged rocks glowed a dull orange under the twin suns. On this desolate world, survival was already a challenge, but some lives were tested in ways harsher than any storm. Lyra, a young alien girl with pale lavender skin and eyes that shimmered like liquid silver, clung to the edge of a cliff, her small body trembling. She had never felt fear like this before, not real fear. The fear now was sharp, raw, and all-encompassing. Behind her, figures from her own people approached, their faces cold and unfeeling. "Let her fall," one voice commanded, crisp and without hesitation. Lyra's heart sank. These were her own people, the ones she trusted, the ones who had promised to protect her. And yet they were ready to cast her into the abyss without a second thought. She had been told that her abilities were dangerous, that she was an anomaly who could not be allowed to live. And now she understood the weight of their words. They would throw her off this cliff without mercy. Lyra's legs shook as she tried to scramble backward. Her hands clawed at the loose soil, but the ground gave way beneath her fingers. She could hear the faint laughter of those who had once smiled at her as a friend. Her heart pounded in her chest like a drum, each beat echoing the certainty of death. And yet somewhere deep inside, a tiny spark of hope refused to die. She closed her eyes, whispered a silent prayer to the stars above, and braced herself for the fall. From across the rocky plain, a figure watched. Kale, a human explorer from a distant system, had been surveying the planet for resources when he stumbled upon this horrifying scene. Humans were known for curiosity, but Kale's curiosity was tempered by morality. He had studied alien societies, their conflicts, their strengths and weaknesses. Yet nothing had prepared him for this, the cold willingness of a society to destroy one of its own, and a child at that. Kale's mind raced. The distance was too great to reach her by running alone, and any sound might alert the others. He needed a plan, fast. Spotting an old glider partially buried among the rocks from a long-forgotten human expedition, he acted without hesitation. Sprinting toward it, he freed the device and adjusted the wings, improvising controls from scraps of metal and wire. There was no time to think. The girl's life depended on speed, on daring, on action. Lyra felt the sudden rush of wind as the first figure shoved her forward. Her body plunged through the air, and for a heartbeat she felt nothing weightless, suspended between the earth and the sky. She closed her eyes, expecting the cold embrace of the rocks below. But then something caught her. A blur of motion, a shadow that seemed impossible. She opened her eyes to see a glider swooping under her, the human pilot bracing against the gusts of wind. "Hold on," Kale shouted, his voice barely audible over the roar of the twin suns' winds. Lyra grasped the edge of the glider, and together they landed roughly on a narrow ledge halfway down the cliff. She gasped, her chest heaving as adrenaline and fear collided. Kale quickly assessed her injuries, scrapes and bruises, but nothing broken. "You're safe for now," he said, his tone calm but firm. "We need to move before they find us." Lyra nodded, too shocked to speak, her mind struggling to process the impossible she had survived. The ones who had cast her aside could not claim her life. Not today. Kale guided her through hidden paths along the cliffside, paths carved by wind and time, paths that humans rarely knew existed. The journey was treacherous, the air thin and hot, but Kale moved with purpose, his eyes always scanning for danger. As they traveled, he spoke softly, introducing himself, explaining his presence on Zirian 9 and assuring Lyra that she was no longer alone. She listened, wide-eyed and cautious, unsure if anyone could be trusted again. Hours later, they arrived at a hidden cave nestled deep in a canyon. Inside, it was cooler, shaded from the harsh suns, with a small stream trickling through. Kale made a crude bed of cloth and soft rocks, and for the first time in her life, Lyra felt the warmth of safety. "You're going to be okay here," Kale said. "No one will find you. I'll teach you to survive, to protect yourself, and when the time comes, you can reclaim your life." Lyra's voice trembled as she whispered, "Why are you helping me? And I won't leave you behind." He encouraged her natural abilities, showing her how to combine them with cleverness and creativity. Lyra learned quickly, her mind sharp and adaptable. The small acts of human ingenuity fascinated her, the way Kale could turn scraps into tools, how he could read patterns in the environment that others overlooked, how he approached danger with a mixture of caution and boldness. Slowly, she began to understand the difference between fear-driven survival and strength built through knowledge and action. At night, they would sit outside the cave and look at the stars. Lyra had never seen a sky so full of light, so vast and endless. Kale spoke of other worlds, of humans traveling through space, encountering other beings, and learning from them. Lyra listened, enraptured, realizing that the universe was bigger than the cliffs, bigger than her suffering, bigger than the fear that had nearly consumed her. "Do you think I'll ever go back?" she asked one night, her voice barely above a whisper. Kale smiled softly, the weight of years in his expression. "Yes, one day you'll return. And when you do, you'll be stronger, wiser, and ready to show them what you've learned. They threw you off a cliff, Lyra. But I promise you one day you'll stand where they tried to cast you down, and you'll be unstoppable." For the first time, hope was no longer a fragile whisper. It was something she could grasp, something she could nurture. She thought of her people, of the injustice done to her, and she vowed silently that she would not only survive but thrive, guided by the strength and ingenuity that humans had shown her. Over the weeks, Lyra's body grew stronger, her mind sharper. Kale introduced her to primitive technology, makeshift tools, traps, ways to manipulate the environment to her advantage. She practiced relentlessly, mastering each skill, learning to anticipate danger before it arrived. Every success built her confidence, every mistake taught her a lesson. Slowly, the frightened girl who had fallen from the cliff became someone capable of changing her own fate. One evening, after a long day of training and exploration, Lyra approached Kale with determination shining in her silver eyes. "I'm ready," she said simply. "I want to go back. I want to face them, not for revenge, but to show them that I survived and I am stronger." But she was ready, not just in skill, but in spirit. "Then we'll do it together," he said. "But remember, strength isn't just power, it's patience, cleverness, and the ability to see opportunities where others see obstacles. We'll use everything we've learned." She thought back to the cliff where her life had nearly ended, to the faces of those who had betrayed her, and she knew that survival was only the first step. What lay ahead was the chance to reshape her destiny, to prove that fear could be overcome, that cruelty could be met with strength and wisdom. And she would do it, not alone, but with the guidance of the human who had saved her life and taught her the power of resilience. The twin suns dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the canyon. Lyra stood at the entrance of the cave, looking out at the rugged terrain that had been both her prison and her training ground. She felt a deep sense of determination settle over her like a cloak. The past had been cruel, but the future was hers to shape. And with Kale by her side, she knew that no cliff, no betrayal, no challenge could stop her. The wind whispered through the canyon, carrying with it the faint promise of change. And for the first time in 15 years, Lyra believed that she was truly free, not just to survive, but to thrive, to reclaim her place in a world that had once cast her aside. 15 years had passed since Lyra had fallen from the cliff, yet the memory of that moment never left her. Each scar on her body, each ache in her muscles, was a reminder of the cruelty she had endured, but also of the human who had saved her. Kale had been more than a savior. He had been a teacher, a mentor, and a guide into a world Lyra had never imagined she could survive in. Over the years, he had carefully shaped her mind and body, teaching her not just to survive, but to think, to plan, to overcome challenges with intelligence and creativity. The hidden canyon where they lived had become a fortress of knowledge and skill. Lyra moved through it with the ease of someone born to it, climbing the rocky slopes, testing traps, and analyzing patterns in the environment. She could spot a predator's approach long before it made a sound, find water hidden beneath the dusty surface, and craft tools from the simplest of materials. But Kale reminded her constantly that true strength was more than physical. It came from clever thinking, patience, and understanding others. "Remember," he said one morning, handing her a small device of polished metal and wires, "this is not just a tool. It's a way to see possibilities that others ignore. Humans create solutions where none seem possible. You must do the same." Lyra nodded, her silver eyes bright with focus. She had long since realized that human ingenuity was unlike anything her people valued. While they relied on raw strength or inherited power, humans found solutions in observation, analysis, and creativity. That knowledge had changed her, and it would continue to change her. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. Lyra trained tirelessly. She studied Kale's methods, practicing tactics, traps, and strategies. She learned how to move silently across the canyon, how to use shadows and terrain to her advantage, and how to anticipate danger before it arrived. She learned diplomacy through stories Kale told of human societies, where negotiation and empathy were often more powerful than swords or weapons. Each lesson built her confidence and shaped her into someone who was no longer just a survivor, but a strategist. One afternoon, Kale and Lyra practiced climbing the jagged cliff walls. The suns burned high in the sky, casting long shadows across the canyon floor. Lyra's hands gripped the rock tightly, muscles straining as she pulled herself upward. She felt the familiar rush of wind against her face, the exhilaration of defying gravity, and the satisfaction of mastering what had once been her prison. "You're faster than I expected," Kale said from below, shading his eyes with one hand. "Your reflexes are sharp, but remember, speed without thought can be dangerous." "I've learned to anticipate, to plan, to see before acting." Her words were firm, filled with a quiet confidence that had grown over years of training. Kale smiled, seeing in her the reflection of the human ideals he had taught her. She was no longer just an alien child. She was a combination of two worlds, the resilience and adaptability of her people, and the ingenuity and wisdom of humans. In the evenings, they would sit by the small stream that ran through their canyon refuge. The water shimmered in the fading light, and the air cooled enough to make it comfortable to linger outside. Kale often spoke of the larger universe, of humans exploring stars, encountering other species, and learning from challenges. Lyra listened intently, absorbing every detail, every lesson. "Humans are not the strongest," Kale said one evening, tossing a small stone into the water, "but they survive. They think, they adapt, they never give up. That is their power, and it can be yours too if you let it." Lyra watched the ripples spread across the water, reflecting on his words. She understood now that her abilities alone were not enough. Raw power without thought was dangerous. But with intelligence, patience, and strategy, she could accomplish things her people had never imagined. Over time, Kale introduced her to technology he had salvaged from old expeditions. He showed her how to repair devices, how to read their functions, and how to repurpose them. Lyra was fascinated by the simplicity and effectiveness of human inventions. A small device could detect heat, measure distance, or even create light in the darkest caves. Each tool was a lesson in observation, problem-solving, and creativity. She practiced relentlessly, testing her skills in every way Kale could imagine, and often in ways he hadn't thought of. One day, Lyra discovered a small settlement far from their canyon. Humans had abandoned it long ago, but the ruins were rich with knowledge. She explored it carefully, mapping the area, noting the patterns of natural traps, and understanding the weaknesses of the structures. Kale watched her, impressed by her careful planning and ingenuity. "You're thinking like a human now," he said, pride in his voice. "Not just reacting, but anticipating. That is how you gain power without confrontation. And a leader must have both." Lyra took these lessons to heart. She dreamed not of revenge, but of justice. She wanted to return to her people not to destroy them, but to show that cruelty could be met with intelligence, compassion, and determination. Weeks turned into months, and Lyra's training reached new heights. She could navigate the most treacherous paths, anticipate threats before they happened, and handle tools and technology with ease. Kale watched her, knowing that the day would soon come when she would leave their sanctuary. "You're ready," he told her one evening, his voice gentle but firm. "Not just ready to survive, but ready to return to your people and face the world. You have learned the human way, and it has made you stronger than you realize." The combination of her alien abilities and human ingenuity gave her an edge no one could predict. "Will they recognize me?" she asked quietly, staring at the horizon. "Will they see the strength I've gained?" "You must do the same. Your strength lies in your mind, Lyra. Use it wisely." She learned how to move silently, how to set traps, and how to use her alien abilities in ways that complemented her human-inspired strategies. As the day approached for their departure, Kale gave her one final piece of advice. "The cliff where they threw you is a symbol, Lyra. It is not just a place of pain, but a reminder of what you have overcome. When you face your past, remember the lessons you have learned. Use your mind, your heart, and your courage. And above all, never forget that your strength comes from the combination of two worlds." She understood now that the journey ahead would be dangerous, that her people might try to stop her, and that she would need every skill she had learned. But she also knew that she was ready. The years of training, the lessons of human ingenuity, and the guidance of Kale had prepared her for this moment. The twin suns rose over the canyon as Lyra stood at the edge of their hidden sanctuary, looking toward the distant mountains where her people lived. She felt a mixture of fear and excitement, knowing that the next step of her journey would test everything she had learned. But she also felt a deep sense of confidence. She was no longer the helpless girl who had fallen from a cliff. She was a survivor, a strategist, and a future leader. Kale joined her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Are you ready?" he asked. Lyra took a deep breath, letting the wind sweep through her silver hair. "Yes," she said firmly, "I am ready." Each step took her closer to her past, but also closer to the future she had chosen. The lessons of human ingenuity, resilience, and patience were her guides, and she would use them to reclaim her place in a world that had once cast her aside. As they traveled through the harsh terrain, Lyra felt a sense of empowerment she had never known before. The cliff where she had once fallen was no longer a symbol of fear. It was a reminder of her growth, of the skills she had learned, and of the human who had shown her that strength could come from more than just survival. With each step, she carried not just her own determination, but the lessons of humanity, ready to face whatever challenges awaited her. The journey to Zirian 9 had been long and exhausting, but Lyra felt no fear now, only determination. The desert winds whipped at her lavender skin, carrying dust that stung her eyes, yet she pressed forward with Kale by her side. For 15 years, she had trained, learned, and grown. Every obstacle she had overcome, every lesson Kale had taught her, had led to this moment. The cliffs she had once fallen from now rose in the distance like silent witnesses, a reminder of her past suffering and the strength she had gained. As they approached the first settlements of her people, Lyra slowed, taking care to observe from a distance. The society she once knew had not changed much on the surface. The same stone structures, the same rigid hierarchies, but beneath it she could see the weakness, the cracks in their system. The leaders were proud, arrogant, and distracted by petty disputes. They had forgotten the value of strategy, of patience, of thinking ahead. "This is what I feared," Lyra said softly, watching from a ridge above the largest city. "They are complacent. They rely on power, not intelligence. Observe, plan, and act. That is how you will reclaim your place." She was a strategist, a thinker, and a survivor, ready to use every skill she had learned. Their first step was to find allies. Kale had taught her that power alone was not enough. She needed people who could support her, who could see her vision, who would follow her not out of fear but out of respect. They moved carefully through the city, observing merchants, laborers, and guards. Lyra noticed the subtle signs of dissatisfaction, the whispered complaints, the tired faces, the fear of arbitrary punishment. These people were waiting for someone to lead them, someone who could inspire hope. Over the next several days, Lyra and Kale approached a few of the city's lower-ranking officials in secret. She spoke to them quietly, using her alien voice but human mannerisms, demonstrating intelligence, strategy, and fairness. Slowly, trust began to form. The officials saw that she was different from the leaders who had betrayed her, calm, thoughtful, and capable of seeing solutions where others saw only problems. Meanwhile, Lyra observed the council that had once thrown her from the cliff. They were engaged in their usual power struggles, bickering over minor issues while ignoring larger threats. Their arrogance and short-sightedness made them predictable. Lyra realized that her plan could succeed, but only if she was patient and clever. She could not confront them directly, not yet. She needed to build influence quietly, to prepare her allies, and to gather information that would give her the advantage when the time came. At night, she and Kale returned to their hidden camp outside the city. The journey through the desert under the twin moons was harsh, but it reminded Lyra of her training years. Every challenge, every obstacle had prepared her for this moment. She could feel the human influence in her thinking, the patience, the planning, the careful observation. Kale watched her with pride, knowing that she had truly absorbed the lessons he had taught her. "You've changed," he said one evening as they settled by a small fire. "You're no longer reacting to the world, you're controlling your environment. That is human strength." "I understand now. Survival is not enough. I must think ahead, anticipate challenges, and use my abilities wisely." She watched as resources were wasted, as injustices were ignored, and as fear maintained control over the citizens. Using small, subtle actions, she began to influence events in ways the leaders could not see. A message here, a rumor there, a minor problem solved cleverly, all designed to make her allies notice her skill without alarming the council. In one instance, a group of merchants faced an unfair tax imposed by the council. Lyra intervened quietly, helping them organize a solution that satisfied both the merchants and the authorities. Her approach was neither confrontational nor aggressive, but precise and clever. The merchants were grateful and began to see her as a force for fairness and intelligence. Word spread slowly, and the whispers of a mysterious savior began circulating among the citizens. Kale reminded her constantly that subtlety was key. If you reveal your strength too soon, they will see you as a threat and move against you. Patience and strategy are your allies. Show them the benefits of your leadership without exposing your full power. Lyra absorbed this advice, understanding that influence often came from perception as much as action. As days turned into weeks, Lyra's network of allies grew. Citizens and minor officials who had once been overlooked or ignored began to follow her guidance, inspired by her intelligence and fairness. She solved disputes, improved resource distribution, and offered strategies that strengthened communities. Slowly, she was not just surviving, she was becoming a leader in her own right. One night, as they returned to their camp, Lyra spoke with Kale about the council that had betrayed her. I can see their weaknesses now. They are predictable, reliant on fear and power. But they are dangerous if provoked too soon. She began to plan small but decisive moves that would allow her to confront the council with the support of her allies and the trust of the citizens. Every action was calculated, every decision weighed carefully. She had learned that intelligence, foresight, and empathy could be more powerful than raw strength or authority. The turning point came when a crisis arose in the city. A sudden sandstorm threatened to destroy critical supplies, and the council was unprepared to respond effectively. Lyra acted quickly, using her knowledge of the terrain and human-inspired strategies to organize relief efforts. She coordinated workers, protected resources, and ensured the safety of the citizens. Her actions were subtle, designed to help without drawing immediate attention to herself, yet the results were undeniable. When the council finally assessed the situation, they found that the crisis had been managed efficiently and with minimal loss. The citizens whispered of a guiding hand, a force that had saved them without seeking recognition. Lyra's reputation grew, her influence spreading quietly through the city. Even some council members began to notice her skill, though none yet understood the full extent of her power. As the twin suns set, casting long shadows across the city, Lyra stood on a high ridge, looking out over the landscape she had once feared. She felt a deep sense of accomplishment. For the first time since she had fallen from the cliff, she realized that she was not a victim of her past. She was shaping her future. The skills Kale had taught her, the lessons of human ingenuity, and the determination she had cultivated over 15 years had brought her to this point. She was ready for the next stage of her plan, reclaiming her rightful place and confronting those who had betrayed her. Kale joined her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You've done well," he said. "Your patience and strategy are paying off, but remember, the most important part of leadership is understanding people. Your strength lies not just in what you can do, but in how you guide others." Over the following weeks, Lyra continued to build her influence. She helped resolve disputes, improved communication between citizens and officials, and subtly guided the council's decisions in ways that benefited the people. Each success increased her confidence and expanded her network of allies. She was no longer invisible. She was a force to be reckoned with. One evening, as they prepared to leave the city and return to their hidden camp, Kale looked at Lyra with pride. "The next steps will be critical," he said. "You've gained their trust, observed their weaknesses, and demonstrated your capabilities. Soon you will confront the council directly. But remember everything you've learned: patience, strategy, empathy, and intelligence. That is what will make you victorious." Lyra had returned to her people's land, not as a frightened child, but as a strategist, a leader, and a survivor. The journey ahead would be difficult, filled with danger and challenges, but she was prepared. She had learned from humans that intelligence, patience, and cleverness could overcome even the most entrenched power. And with Kale by her side, she knew that she could face whatever obstacles awaited her, confident in the strength she had gained over 15 years of training and growth. The desert sun rose over Zirian 9, painting the jagged cliffs in hues of gold and red. Lyra stood on the ridge above the city, her silver eyes scanning the landscape below. For weeks she had carefully built her influence, quietly guiding citizens, helping the marginalized, and demonstrating solutions where the council had failed. Now the time had come for action. She had to confront the leaders who had once cast her from the cliff, to show them that she was no longer powerless. Kale stood beside her, calm and steady. "Remember," he said, "strength is not just what you can do, but how you use it. Watch, plan, and act at the right moment. You have the advantage, but only if you remain patient." Lyra nodded, her expression firm. She had learned patience and strategy over the years, and now all the lessons came together. Their plan was simple yet effective. Lyra would use her knowledge of the city and the council's weaknesses to create situations that exposed their incompetence while protecting the citizens. She would act subtly, ensuring the council could not predict her moves. Meanwhile, her allies, who had quietly grown loyal to her, would support her efforts. The first test came when the council attempted to enforce a harsh new law, increasing taxes on essential supplies. Citizens were already struggling, and the council had ignored warnings of unrest. Lyra saw the opportunity. Using her network, she organized an alternative plan, distributing supplies through hidden channels, alerting merchants, and creating a system that avoided confrontation but ensured survival. By the time the council realized what had happened, the citizens were safe, and the council looked incompetent. Whispers spread quickly through the city about a guiding hand, a mysterious force that had saved them without seeking recognition. Lyra watched from the shadows, satisfaction building within her. The council's arrogance made them predictable. Their failure to adapt was their weakness. She had learned from humans that intelligence often outweighed raw power, and now her strategy was proving effective. Kale gave her a small nod, proud but cautious. "They are noticing," he said quietly, "but you must keep your advantage. Act carefully, or they may strike back before you're ready." Each move was calculated, designed to build trust among the people while weakening the council's authority. One evening, as the twin suns set and cast long shadows across the city, Lyra observed a council meeting from a hidden vantage point. The leaders argued over minor issues, their voices raised in frustration. Lyra noticed how predictable their patterns had become, the same rivalries, the same lack of foresight, the same reliance on fear to control others. She had studied these weaknesses for weeks, and now she would exploit them. The next morning, Lyra arranged a public demonstration. A minor crisis had arisen. A bridge connecting two parts of the city was damaged, threatening transportation and commerce. The council debated how to respond, but indecision and bickering delayed action. Lyra seized the opportunity. Using tools and strategies she had learned from Kale, she quickly repaired the bridge and coordinated the workers. The citizens watched in amazement as the problem was solved efficiently and safely, without chaos or conflict. The council arrived shortly after, expecting to assert authority, only to find the bridge restored and the citizens grateful. Murmurs spread through the chambers. Some council members tried to claim credit, but their efforts were weak and unconvincing. Lyra's subtle strategy had worked perfectly. She had demonstrated competence and leadership without revealing herself fully, and the council's weaknesses were on display for all to see. Kale whispered beside her, "This is human ingenuity in action. You have shown that intelligence and planning are more powerful than authority alone. But remember, the real test is coming, the confrontation with those who betrayed you." Days passed and tensions escalated. The council, growing aware of a force undermining them, began investigating, but Lyra had covered her tracks carefully. Citizens now trusted her guidance, and her allies were ready to act if necessary. She observed the patterns of movement, the responses to challenges, and the decisions of each council member. Every mistake they made reinforced her advantage. The turning point came when the council decided to hold a public ceremony to assert control over the city. Lyra knew this was her chance to reveal herself and demonstrate the consequences of their failures. She prepared carefully, coordinating with her allies and planning every detail. Her strategy was not to attack or seek revenge, but to show that leadership required intelligence, empathy, and foresight, qualities the council had long ignored. The day of the ceremony, the city gathered in the central square. The council arrived, expecting to display power and command respect. Lyra, hidden among the crowd, watched as they took the stage. She had arranged for minor crises to unfold during the event, problems only she could solve efficiently, demonstrating leadership and competence. As a small fire threatened the market stalls, Lyra acted quickly. Using her agility and tools, she extinguished the flames, coordinated citizens to safeguard their belongings, and restored order seamlessly. The crowd watched in awe, recognizing the skill and intelligence behind the actions. Whispers spread. This mysterious figure was not only capable but remarkable. The council attempted to intervene, but their efforts were clumsy and poorly coordinated. Their authority was undermined in plain sight, and the citizens' attention shifted to Lyra's actions. Her influence was undeniable, and the leaders who had once cast her down could no longer hide their incompetence. Kale stood beside her, observing with quiet pride. "Now is the time," he whispered. "You have built trust, demonstrated skill, and revealed the council's weaknesses. Your moment is here." The citizens gasped, recognizing the girl who had once disappeared from their world. Her silver eyes shone with determination, and her presence commanded attention. She spoke clearly and confidently, addressing the people and the council alike. "I am Lyra," she said, her voice carrying across the square. 15 years ago, I was cast from a cliff by those who should have protected me. I survived not because of strength alone, but because I learned patience, strategy, and intelligence. I have returned not for revenge, but to show that leadership requires more than fear and power. It requires wisdom, fairness, and courage. The citizens, however, listened closely, inspired by her words and her actions. Whispers of admiration spread, and the mood shifted. Lyra's strategy had worked. She had exposed the council's failures, demonstrated competence, and earned the trust of the people. One council member, bold and arrogant, stepped forward, attempting to challenge her. "You are but a child. You have no authority here. I have shown the citizens a better way." Over the following hours, Lyra coordinated with her allies to further demonstrate leadership. Minor challenges arose, disputes, accidents, logistical problems, but she solved each with precision and intelligence. Citizens witnessed her capabilities firsthand, and the council's authority eroded with every success. By evening, the council had no choice but to acknowledge her influence. They could not oppose her openly without risking complete loss of credibility. Lyra had accomplished what she had set out to do. She had returned to her people, exposed the council's failures, and demonstrated the power of intelligence, patience, and strategic thinking. Kale stood beside her as the sun set, casting long shadows over the city. "You have done it," he said quietly. "You have used everything you have learned to create change without unnecessary conflict. That is human ingenuity at its finest." She had turned a moment of betrayal into a demonstration of strength, using intelligence and strategy rather than force. Her people had witnessed the power of patience, observation, and planning, the qualities humans had taught her to value above all. The city would never be the same. The council had been challenged, their weaknesses exposed, and the citizens had seen a new form of leadership. Lyra had taken the first decisive step toward reclaiming her place and reshaping her world, guided by human wisdom, alien strength, and a determination that could not be broken. The twin moons rose over Zirian 9, casting a silver glow on the cliffs and the city below. Lyra stood tall, feeling the wind on her face, knowing that she had begun to change the world, not through brute force, but through strategy, courage, and intelligence. The journey was far from over, but she was ready for whatever came next, confident in the strength she had built over 15 years of learning and preparation. The city of Zirian 9 stirred quietly in the early hours of the morning, bathed in the soft light of the twin suns rising above the horizon. Lyra stood on the high ridge overlooking the bustling streets, her silver eyes calm and focused. The events of the previous days had shifted everything. The council that had once cast her from a cliff was weakened, their authority challenged, and their incompetence made clear to all citizens. Yet Lyra knew that true leadership required more than a single victory. It required guidance, reform, and a vision for the future. Kale stood beside her, silently observing the city. "Today marks a turning point," he said quietly. "You have demonstrated intelligence, strategy, and courage, but now you must show them that leadership is more than action. It is vision." Lyra nodded, feeling the weight of his words. She had trained for this moment, practiced for years, and now everything she had learned would be tested not in a fight, but in the hearts and minds of her people. The streets below were already alive with activity. Citizens moved carefully through the markets and pathways, speaking quietly of the mysterious figure who had helped them during crises, who had shown wisdom and fairness where the council had failed. Whispers of Lyra's name traveled quickly, though many had yet to see her face. She had waited for the right moment to reveal herself fully, to show not just her abilities, but the values she carried, human-inspired intelligence, empathy, and leadership combined with her alien heritage. As she descended into the city, her steps confident, citizens began to notice. Children pointed, elders whispered, and workers paused in their tasks. Lyra did not speak yet. She simply moved with purpose, allowing her presence to speak for itself. She felt the familiar strength of Kale's guidance within her. The years of training and preparation crystallized into every thought and action. The council had gathered in the central square, expecting to reassert control in the wake of the previous crises. They were unaware of how much influence Lyra had already gained among the people. When she entered the square, the murmurs grew louder. The council members looked at her in shock, recognizing the girl they had once cast aside. But Lyra's eyes, steady and confident, told them that she was no longer the child they had betrayed. She was a strategist, a leader, and a force that could not be ignored. "I am Lyra," she said, her voice clear and strong, carrying over the square. 15 years ago, I was cast from a cliff by those who should have protected me. Today, I return not to seek revenge, but to show that leadership requires more than fear, cruelty, or authority. It requires wisdom, fairness, and vision. It requires courage, intelligence, and the ability to guide others. The crowd listened intently, drawn to her presence and the certainty in her words. The council attempted to interrupt, their voices raised in protest. "You have no right to speak for us. You are not our leader," one of them shouted. Lyra's silver eyes narrowed, but her voice remained calm. "Leadership is not granted by birth or fear," she said. "It is earned through action, through the ability to solve problems, guide people, and inspire loyalty. You have failed in that duty. The citizens have seen a better way, and they have chosen hope over fear." Her carefully built network of allies stepped forward, quietly ensuring that the council could not disrupt the growing support. Every small action she had orchestrated over the weeks culminated in this moment. The citizens recognized her competence, her fairness, and her vision for a better future. One council member, the very one who had pushed her off the cliff years ago, stepped forward in defiance. "You are still a child. How can you challenge us after everything we have done?" Lyra's gaze met his, steady and unyielding. "I am no longer a child," she said calmly. "I am a survivor, a strategist, and a leader. You measured power by fear. I measure it by wisdom, fairness, and the ability to inspire. Today, you see the results of that measure. It is not strength alone that commands respect. It is intelligence, courage, and vision." They had seen her in action, solving problems, guiding communities, and protecting lives. She had demonstrated qualities that the council lacked: foresight, empathy, and cleverness. The city itself had begun to shift its loyalty. Lyra moved through the square, addressing minor issues immediately as they arose: a damaged stall, a dispute between merchants, a misunderstanding among workers. Each action reinforced her message. Leadership was not about titles or fear, but about solving problems and guiding people wisely. Citizens watched in awe, whispering admiration, and even some of the council members began to recognize her skill and foresight. Cale observed silently, pride swelling within him. The girl he had saved 15 years ago was now a true leader. Her strategy, intelligence, and human-inspired patience had transformed her into a figure that even the most stubborn leaders could not ignore. He knew that the final step was near: the recognition of her role not just as a problem solver, but as a rightful leader among her people. The day reached its peak when the city council convened once more to address growing unrest and the apparent shift in public loyalty. Lyra stepped forward, presenting solutions that were both fair and practical, demonstrating her understanding of governance, strategy, and justice. The citizens supported her at every turn, their confidence in her unwavering. The council members were left with no choice but to acknowledge her wisdom. Finally, after a long day of debate and observation, the council approached Lyra with cautious respect. "We see your abilities, your guidance, and your fairness," they admitted. "You have proven that leadership is not merely inherited but earned. The citizens respect you, and we recognize that your vision benefits all of Zirian 9. Lyra's heart swelled with a quiet pride. She had achieved what she had trained for all these years, not by force, not by fear, but by intelligence, empathy, and patience. With the council's acknowledgement, the city formally welcomed her as a leader. Citizens cheered openly, grateful for the guidance and fairness she had demonstrated. Lyra had transformed her role from a hidden strategist to a recognized figure of authority, blending her alien heritage with human-inspired wisdom. Cale stood beside her, smiling quietly. "You have done more than survive," he said softly. "You have transformed your world." The lessons Cale had taught her, the value of observation, strategy, and empathy, guided every interaction. She was no longer merely the girl who had fallen from a cliff. She was a leader who embodied intelligence, courage, and vision. Over the following weeks, Lyra implemented reforms to improve the city. She addressed corruption, reorganized resource distribution, and established systems that allowed citizens to voice concerns safely. Her alien abilities, combined with human-inspired strategy, allowed her to manage the city efficiently while maintaining fairness and transparency. Slowly, trust in leadership grew, and the city began to flourish. Kale remained by her side, continuing to advise and guide her. "Your journey has been remarkable," he said one evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon. "You have combined human wisdom with your own abilities to achieve what many could not. Leadership is not just about power. It is about the ability to see, plan, and act for the greater good. You have done all of that." The people of Zirian 9 began to celebrate her achievements. Citizens who had once whispered in fear now spoke openly of hope and change. Leaders who had relied on fear and coercion now recognized the value of wisdom and fairness. The city had transformed, guided by a leader who had learned from humans, survived against impossible odds, and emerged stronger than anyone could have imagined. Lyra stood once more on the cliff where her life had almost ended, the same place where she had fallen years ago. She looked down at the city below, the streets alive with activity, the citizens moving with purpose and confidence. The wind swept through her hair, carrying with it the memory of her fall, the guidance of Kale, and the lessons she had learned. For the first time, the cliff was not a symbol of fear or betrayal. It was a reminder of her strength, her intelligence, and her ability to shape her own destiny. Kale joined her, his hand on her shoulder, sharing the moment in quiet acknowledgement. "You have done more than survive, Lyra," he said softly. "You have changed the world, and you have shown the true power of human ingenuity combined with courage and heart." Today, she was not only alive, she was a leader, a symbol of hope, and a force capable of transforming her world. Her journey had been long, filled with challenges and lessons, but she had emerged stronger, wiser, and ready to guide her people toward a brighter future. The city below echoed with the voices of its citizens, celebrating their new leader. Lyra smiled, knowing that this was just the beginning. With patience, intelligence, and human-inspired strategy, she would continue to guide her people, ensuring that the mistakes of the past were never repeated. Her legacy would be one of courage, ingenuity, and fairness, a testament to the power of combining human wisdom with determination and alien strength. As the twin moons rose over Zirian 9, Lyra stood tall on the cliff, feeling the wind on her face. She had survived the fall, trained with purpose, and returned to claim her place. The future was hers to shape, and she was ready for whatever challenges awaited. The girl who had once been thrown from a cliff had become a leader, a strategist, and a symbol of hope. And in that moment, Lyra knew that she had truly fulfilled the promise she had made to herself 15 years ago, to rise stronger than those who had cast her down, and to show that courage, intelligence, and perseverance could change the world.